they'd just been to a rather dubious rave party. And I was on the London Tube the other day, and there was a woman just down from me, nearly opposite. And she was a mature woman, you know, she was of a certain age, and she had a little bottle of water. And I thought, does she really need this, or is it a fashion statement?
Well, there are some people who swear by bottled water, so, I mean, they can't, I mean, you're talking about educated people, they can't be wrong, completely wrong if they're buying sort of bottles of water, do you not think?
Well, the bloke who's selling it, he's absolutely convinced they're right.
Well,
he said, how right can you be? Have another one.
Well, it's quite connoisseurs, but any fluids in excess, the same as a lot of these guys who go down to the pub, I don't think they realise it. If you have 6 or 7 pints of beer, it's not just the alcohol that's ruining your liver, it's all the fluid going through your system. It's not doing your body's vitamin, mineral balance.
Well, it's nearly a gallon.
I know, it's unbelievable.
And when you pick up a gallon's worth of something in a can or something like that, you can really feel it. So it's no wonder they start to just spread over the belt loops.
Oh, true. Do you really think, though, that a lot of these scare stories about food prices, which you've been mentioning, etc., do you really think that there's any truth to that? Or do you think it's just spin?
No, I think it's probably true, because if they don't have enough flour, they still have the same operating costs, so they're still paying George, Bert, Harry and Lorraine what they have to pay them to do their job, but their profit margins diminish because they don't have so much flour, because the harvest was damaged simply because it was too hot.
Oh, right, but I mean, the wheat industry is a very global industry. You get harvests from all over the world, Argentina, Africa, Asia, they get from all over the world, Europe, the States.
Well, if they've invested in their regular suppliers, which are in the UK, let's assume.
Oh, yeah.
You know, that would put a shame. Now, it's interesting you mentioned flour and changing around the world. I was speaking to a German specialist on this a couple of years ago, and he was telling me not so many years ago, there were about 1,600 varieties of flour in Europe alone. Or wheat, rather. Now, in recent times, we've been talking about people who are wheat intolerant. You must have heard about that.
Oh, yeah, the reaction people, yeah.
And the reason for that, apparently, is because they've scaled it right down to somewhere around 4, 5 or 6, maybe 8 varieties in all. So if you don't fit in one of those groups, you're going to be intolerant.
Oh,
and that's largely due to trying to produce a wheat that will survive in extreme temperatures. So it can be very cold and damp, but that wheat will still progress. Obviously, they've not been using this for rank hovis because their wheat didn't pass the heat test, did it?
Oh, yeah, it's interesting things like that. I was listening to a guy once, he was up on the north, he was one of these, I think what the Americans would call a forest ranger or something, a warden up on the North Yorkshire moors, and he was talking about all the grazing land there, and there used to be so many different varieties of flowers and all the rest of it in the fields where the cows used to graze. But with a lot of these herbicides or whatever they're putting down in there, they've killed off so many of the flowers and whatever it is, herbs that grow in the grasses, and the cows are just not as healthy as they used to be. It's not the herbicide, it's the lack of all the little micronutrients they used to get from all these little plants that used to grow there.
Do you know, it's a strange thing, John. The further you get along the path, whether it be, that particular area you just mentioned, or you're just reading something in a book, you suddenly realise that about 50 or 100 years ago, farmers were right across it, whether they knew it or not, but they had so much going for them. And now that we've scaled that system down and we've brought everything down to a minimalist approach, you suddenly realise that we might have taken the baby out of the bathwater.
Oh, true. And by the way, sir, can I just take this opportunity, you mentioned farmers, it reminded me, can I just wish the farmers here in North Yorkshire well, because some long traditions ended here. The sugar beet industry is ending in Yorkshire, and a lot of the farmers will be facing a lot of hardship in the future.
Are you a farmer yourself?
No, sir. It's just that we have a lot of farmers around York, and they're smashing people. They're real down-to-earth, honest people. It's a pleasure to know such people around here. But a lot of them are going to be facing a lot of hardship in the years ahead because the sugar beet industry is ending.
Thoughts are with them, John. Thanks for remembering this morning. Thank you. This is Talk Sport. George is going to be looking at the pictures of the Prime Minister. There's our gallant leader in a floral pair of swim shorts. And also wearing floral swim shorts, David Cameron for the opposition.
Very nice shorts they are too.
They're not too twangy, are they?
No, I'm not sure if I'd wear them, but...
not at the same time, most certainly not. The number is 08704 20 20 20. Do give us a call. Text me on 81089. This is talkSPORT.
talkSPORT.
You just know you've heard that music on an afternoon movie. What were you doing watching the television? And there it was. And it was something about driving around on a Vespa in Italy. Very likely. Mike Parry's coming in just a moment to give us the inside line on what the sports breakfast is going to be chasing this morning. That's all to come. Joining me to look through the press this morning, our gallant leader on the other side of the glass. Now listen, George, there we are. The image of a NASA landing on the moon.
Ah, yes.
How many bedrooms in the 60s and 70s had pictures of spacemen on the wall?
Yeah.
You know, it was de rigueur, wasn't it? And then you got to the 80s and I had to have Debbie Harry up there. But
where are they now?
Well, interestingly enough, you should say that, because nobody knows. NASA has mislaid, you understand, is significantly less painful than lost, mislaid the original footage of Neil Armstrong's historic moon landing.
Oh, no.
He lost it.
Maybe that's because it was never real in the first place.
Now, that's interesting you should say that, because I think it's David Pert, I could be wrong, but he wrote a book called Dark Moon, and he's the guy who you probably saw on television explaining the way the shadows are falling all over the place.
Yeah,
so those pictures they took, you know, how did they get a light source onto the dark side of the limb, let alone anything else?
There's something else about the reflection in the visor.
That's right, that was upside down.
Exactly, yeah, loads. And why the flag ripples when there shouldn't be any wind on the moon, and all these kind of questions. Maybe they didn't want the experts to get hold of that original footage and test it, and so they've mislaid it.
Do you know, there's a reason I felt that we would work together, you know, because there's nothing conspiracy theory about you, is there? It's very interesting to say that. Why else would they mislay it?
Yeah, surely that would be the most important thing in NASA's archive.
Now, I would imagine the surface of the moon is a bit dusty. When they had the shot of the limb going down and just retro-firing, you know, just to settle, I don't recall seeing a dust storm.
No, me neither. I don't recall much dust being kicked up by Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin as they were playing American football on the surface of the moon either.
I can't remember who it was, but somebody said that if you double the speed that you play out them jumping around, it actually translates to Earth gravity.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Ah, that's not surprising.
And the other thing, just not to labour this to death, the cameras they had didn't have a focal adjustment. They were a fixed focus. And when you look at the pictures, the images, one thing you have to admit, they are pin sharp.
Yeah, and also, wasn't there something about those films would never have survived re-entry through the Earth's atmosphere or something? I'm sure I read something about that.
That's right, because they had to go through the Van Allen belt.
Yeah, which would have completely ruined any pictures.
So it could have jeopardised the integrity of the film stock on the way out. And then they went through the Van Allen belt, and what were they wearing? A cotton jumpsuit.
Yeah.
You need more than that in a decent pub on a Saturday night.
Absolutely. There's news in the Daily Mail this morning that actually explains scientifically the 7-year itch. Apparently, scientists believe the difference between the sex drives of men and women result from the way humans evolved. A man needs to maintain a high sex drive to ensure he is not cuckolded by another male. But a woman's libido starts to wane as soon as she feels sure she's got her man. So while the woman's less interested in sex, the man becomes more interested. So that explains why men go off and find younger single women when their woman is all secure and married.
We were talking last night about women becoming the largest base of millionaires. As a sex, a gender, in the country in just a couple of years' time, and the story has fled across and appears in the Monday morning papers as well. My God, I can't believe. Why would that be?
Well, I think the night news editors were listening to our show.
It's either that or it's the politicians are away.
Yeah.
Anyway, it's interesting that we've got women in certain age ranges now being in a very powerful position to call the shots. I wonder what difference it will make. I wonder if we're going to see a more relaxed, caring response when it comes to big business. Or does that make no difference? Maybe women are slightly less merciful than men when it comes to big decisions.
I think the kind of woman who makes it in big business tends to be a pretty hard-nosed type of woman. I think you have to be able to reach that sort of echelon of industry.
Yes.
So, I think if you're expecting us to all get touchy-feely when women are in charge, I don't think it's going to happen.
Yes. A friend of mine went to dinner with a couple, and the woman's very big news in television, very important. Oh, yeah. And he said it was almost a scene from a theatre production. The husband was looking after everybody. Can I just freshen that glass for you, Roger? Oh, Mary, another, whatever. And herself was in the kitchen with her mobile phone under her left ear as she was beating some sense into some French dressing, and talking about network changes and challenges on the mobile phone. Now, that, I think, betrays a certain in excess. You're listening to talkSPORT. Mike Parry's coming in to tell us what's on the breakfast show this morning. Later on, when that beats its way to a retirement at 10 o'clock, breathless but exultant, John Galt's back. Which means that James Whale returns to his normal evening slot tonight from Monday through Thursday from 10 through till 1, and he's damned angry at the way the government are handling the terror threat. I put the radio on the other day, actually, and there was James. I'm very angry this morning. I thought, it's not changed. He's still there. What else you got for us?
Well, one of the stories that's on a lot of papers, on a couple of the front pages actually, the Daily Mail's got it as their headline, Get Britain Flying Again, MPs and airlines call for troops to end airport meltdown. And a lot of the papers have actually been speculating that a lot of the changes that we've seen over the past couple of days, such as no hand luggage except see-through carrier bags with only prescription medication and all that kind of stuff, there's a possibility that those measures could be here to stay, and we'll never again see the days when you can take on your iPod, your book, your laptop into the airplane. And if that is the case, insurance companies are going to have to change the whole way they operate, because I don't know anyone who would be willing to put their laptop or their camera or any other expensive items into the hold, because it's happened to me where expensive items just go missing from your case and there's nothing you can do about it.
Well, I did hear that they might be changing that carry-on situation and then allowing, since we've come down from critical to slightly concerned, might be able to take on one piece of hand luggage. It's a question of might. But one of the things that crossed my mind when I was reading about the troops being involved here is that these guys aren't trained to do this. So they may not necessarily know what to look for.
Yes.
Or be qualified in interpreting the machinery, that does the final scanning, because it's the stuff that goes in the hold goes through a far more sophisticated scanner than the stuff that goes into the cabin. So I just wonder how fair it'll be on them, because they've got to absorb and carry, quite a chunk of responsibility. And if it goes wrong, then it'll be the army let us down. It won't be that we gave them the wrong job. I mean, it's fighting someone, I rest my case.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I don't know. I think the problem is there's no end to this terrorist threat, if you believe what the government and the papers are telling us. And how can you suddenly say now that it's time for us to lessen security? Because anybody could supposedly take in these liquid explosives and what have you in their hand luggage if they start allowing this to go on. So, well, where's the end to it?
There speaks the voice of reason. We've got a situation that, in truth, we're making each other feel good about by saying, well, it's perfectly all right, the experts are right across it. But who are the experts? And what's their experience on this? Probably not a lot.
If you think about Richard Reed, the shoe bomber, a couple of years ago, he was actually on a flight. He was there ready to detonate an explosive hidden in his shoe with a matchstick, and there was nowhere near the same amount of fuss that this has caused, and as far as we know, nobody actually ever made it onto a flight in this occasion.
No. Well, it is true that the government's been accused of failing to get to grips with the chaos, and there's a double-page feature on this in the Daily Mail today, on page 8 and 9. So which of us would you treat differently, asked the question. I think this is going to play out rather difficult as an issue, because you can't put a spin on something. You can't be too glib on an issue such as this. It's too important to treat lightly. Wouldn't you suggest?
Absolutely, yeah. And it's impossible to pick out who is going to be a terrorist from a crowd, as the point they're making with this article.
A very interesting piece which has been with us for nearly 3 days now in different forms. Why I asked my two best friends to help me die. We'll be finding out a little bit more about that in a minute. Mike Parry's joined us, and good morning.
Yeah, morning, Mike, and good morning it's going to be, I should think, myself and Mr. Beecroft from 6 o'clock. The first question we will be asking of our audience is, where were the Chelsea fans yesterday? Why a no-show at the Millennium? Chelsea fans, supposed to be the wealthiest fans as a profile in this country. Very short journey, really, from London to Cardiff, compared to the 5-hour journey that the Liverpool fans had to make from Liverpool down to Cardiff. Liverpool fans filled up their end, but the Chelsea fans didn't. Where were they?
Do you know, it might just be that they all went on holiday together. Doesn't work with you?
Well, you see, the issue here is Chelsea demand status as a big club, right?
Yes.
You know, we are a big club. Well, they're certainly the richest club. Nobody can dispute that. Richest club in the world. Are they a big club? Well, that depends a lot on your heritage, and they're now starting to clock up the trophies and the cups that they've got in their cabinet. But the essential issue is, what is your fan base for a big club? And that's why Blackburn Rovers, for instance, the only team outside the fashionable teams who've won the Premiership, will never become a big club because they haven't got the fan base. But have Chelsea got the fan base? Or will it take another 20 or 30 years to establish that fan base to be called a big club and demand that respect that a big club demands? Well, we're going to find out. We want to talk to the Chelsea fans this morning and find out why they were not there.
You had a chat with Steve McLaren.
We certainly did.
I heard the start of the programme, but I didn't hear it much past the start. Why did he let Beckham go?
Why did he let Beckham go?
Yeah.
Purely footballing reasons, that's what he said. And if you look at it, footballing reasons mean they don't think he's fast enough down the right, and that there are other options there, like Sean Wright-Phillips, for instance, who could add a bit of pace, like Aaron Lennon, for instance, who could add a bit of pace. So they just think that he thought his legs had gone. That's the official reason. And actually, we had a great talk with Steve McLaren yesterday, and you'll find a lot of what you read in your newspaper this morning was picked out of the talk that Andy Townsend and I had with him about whether or not players should write books while they're still playing, or should those secrets remain inside the dressing room. The other version, or the other theory as to why Beckham was dropped, and this is one that Steve McLaren completely dismisses, is that Beckham represented the Sven-Göran Eriksson era in a huge way. I mean, he was the badge of the Sven-Göran Eriksson revolution, which never happened, actually. And Beckham was far too united with the previous manager. He was almost part of the management team, so he had to go. I mean, it was Steve McLaren's statement. This is now my ball game, and these are the people who are going to be part of my team, and David Beckham is not included.
That, to me, looking in on the situation, suggests, I don't know, it sort of smells of the truth, rather than the legs going.
Oh yeah, I mean, people don't understand how influential David Beckham was. For instance, David Beckham could often interrupt meetings that Sven-Göran Eriksson was conducting with his management team, you know, with his coaches and his scouts, and get the attention of the manager and take him off to do something else. So he's very, very influential, Beckham, very influential indeed. And he was also had the huge support of the FA commercial department for his ability to raise interest, therefore raise the amount of money people would pay to cover England's game. So he was massive. So it's a very brave decision, really, by Steve McLaren. But most football purists will tell you that David Beckham's better days are behind him, and therefore it makes sense to start again. If you're a new manager and you want to rebuild a team, don't start with an iconic figure in your pack, because you'll have to get rid of that iconic figure during the course of the 4 years. David Beckham's 31 now, so if he made the next World Cup, that would be about it. More likely, probably only the next European Championships, and that's why he's gone. And I have to say, I support him in that. You know, you get a new manager, you want a new setup. So all that and much, much more from Mr. Beecroft and myself from 6 o'clock. Also, Mike, have you seen the one-liner that's been picked as the greatest one-liner of all time. Peter Kay's one-liner saying, "Garlic bread, it's the future. I know, I've tasted it." Now, that's supposed to be the funniest line ever in comedy. I don't
The
think
funniest line ever?
Yeah, the funniest one-liner ever. I don't think it's the funniest one-liner ever. I much prefer the Mrs. Merton one. So, Debbie, when did you first take an interest in the millionaire? What first attracted you to the millionaire Paul Daniels? I think that's a much better one. But we're going to ask our listeners to send us emails and text on their favourite one-liners from comedians, or maybe not even comedians, maybe philosophers over the years, to see whether we can find a better one than Peter Kay's. See you later.
Right, okay, it's all on talkSPORT. And the breakfast show starts, it's official, at 6 o'clock. I'm Mike Allen. Let's find out what Mary's got for us.
talkSPORT Traffic and Travel.
We've got a road blockage if you're out and about in Cornwall in Penryn on the Penryn bypass, the A39. That's blocked off both ways due to a crash near to the B3229. In Putney Vale in London, the southbound A3 Roehampton Vale, it has a burst water main and still a lane closure. Do watch out for emergency repair works at Stag Lane. Could cause a few delays during the rush hour period. Further afield in North Somerset, the southbound M5 has a lane closure due to a vehicle fire between junction 19 and junction 20. And in Warwickshire and Redditch, there's a lane closure on the A435 due to a crash both ways at the Coventry Highway. Finally, there's still disruption at the airports, all UK airports, due to flights implementation of additional security checks. So do check with the operator before you travel and allow extra time for your journey. Mary Jacobs, talkSPORT Traffic and Travel.
talkSPORT Traffic and Travel. The return of the football.
Yes! What a goal!
The Premiership returns this Saturday on talkSPORT.
Unbelievable!
Good morning, it's talkSPORT. I'm Mike Allen. Working our way towards a sports breakfast with the gang, and on that direction, a look at the morning papers, the stories that people will be talking about. In the Times, the thunder of bombs and missiles drowned out UN's voice of peace, a bright flash, and everyone died for cover. We're talking, of course, about Hezbollah firing hundreds more missiles and refuses to disarm as 30,000 Israeli troops press into southern Lebanon. People are saying that getting these guys to turn round and adopt an attitude, a philosophy, which probably isn't known to the majority of the guys taking part in this operation, or is almost impossible. You may care to comment on this. You might think, well, I'll just wait and see how it opens up and maybe have a chat with John Gorn later on this morning. It's up to you entirely, of course, but I'd be very interested to hear from you. Inspectors who care home visit are to face spot checks themselves. Inspectors will attempt to prevent the misuse of tranquilizers and improve the quality of food in care homes. There can't be many of us who haven't been affected at one time or another by inviting senior relatives to maybe consider the option of a care home, because then, if you're out working every day and maybe most of the weekend, you can have some sort of tranquility about you, knowing that they're with someone, and maybe you're buying that tranquility yourself. Yes, of course you are. But the truth of the matter is, care homes to face spot checks has got to be good news. You haven't approached any of this yet, George. You haven't had to go through this, I would imagine.
No, not in my immediate family, no. But my grandmother lives in a sheltered home, and it's actually turned out to be a blessing for her, because it means she's always with other people, she's always got things to do, whereas if she was on her own in her house, I think she probably would have died a lot earlier. Because there's just nothing for you to do on your own at that age. You can't go to the shops. You know, you're almost a prisoner in your own house.
Yeah, there's that, and also the concept of people you can talk to. I know it's against all odds that you're going to be 100% happy with everyone who's there.
Yeah.
But you're going to find 2 or 3 people you can talk to.
And she's found people she was at school with who she hasn't seen for years, and struck up a friendship again that she never would have had she not moved into this home. So
yes. Yeah.
It was a good thing, I think.
A friend of mine had a similar situation, but it turned out he was in a minimum security prison.
Well, talking of that, the terror suspects that are being held at the moment, according to the Daily Express, have been moaning that their cells are too cold. A Muslim lawyer sparked anger last night by attacking Scotland Yard's treatment of suspects held over the plot to blow up crowded airliners. And I think this is just the start of things to come, because there's bound to be case after case of human rights trials going on as soon as these guys, if more of them are released, and without charges, then they're going to be taking everyone they can to court to try and get compensation over this.
This particular development and the invitation by the security forces, these people to join them for an interview, is terribly, terribly important, because we cannot afford to get this one wrong.
No.
Who's going to believe anybody?
Exactly.
Very worrying. A pilot was allegedly chased the other day by a runaway aircraft. This is a story on page 12 in the news section of the Times. A pilot was left with serious injuries after he was pursued by a runaway aircraft and cornered in a hangar. If it weren't so dark and wicked, it could almost be a comedy sketch. One of those planes that ran away with itself. There's also a report about the rejection that was brutal even by the harsh standards of the film industry. There's no cinema-going audience for this type of film. The UK Films Council told the 22-year-old novice director Greg Hall, when he applied for a grant of £3,500 to make his first feature film, The Plague. Undeterred, he stuck to a rejection letter to his wall and scraped together the money from friends and family, and now his determination appears to have paid off. Not only is he being hailed as an astonishing new talent by the veteran director Mike Leigh, but The Plague is to be released in cinemas nationwide this autumn. Isn't it interesting how little coverage, good news, positive news like that we have in the UK? If it had been America, it would have probably been all over the place, and people have been celebrating.
Well, I saw The Plague actually about a year ago, because due to his rejection by the film industry in the UK, he ended up releasing it on the internet to sort of gain more publicity for it and get it spoken about, and I think that's how Mike Leigh ended up seeing it, and that's what's led to its theatrical release. And it's an excellent film. It should have been released immediately in the cinema. There's absolutely nothing wrong with it, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. I'm glad that it's finally getting a theatrical release.
Do you know, one of the things that happened to music in the 80s, it fragmented, because around about the middle towards the end of the 80s, people were looking for a little bit more. We'd been through punk in the 70s, and survived that, came out the other side, sewed up our jeans and said, it won't be that ridiculous again. But one of the interesting bits about it, you can relate what happened, that fragmentation of music, to what happens in Hollywood now, because I was reading the other day that Tom Cruise may never be offered a big adventure action role again because he's costing too much money.
Yeah.
And people can't afford to take the chance.
Yeah, well, if you look at some of the low-budget films that have come out over the last few years that have made absolute fortunes, films like The Blair Witch Project and what have you, that's got to be the way for Hollywood to go. And if that is the way that filmmaking is going to go, then the power's going to end up being wrenched away from Hollywood and back to the independent filmmaker. And the beauty of inventions like the internet is that you can spread it out to the whole world without having to get a big name distributor behind the project.
And when you go back in cinematic history, you suddenly discover they were all independent operators. That's how they started out.
Yeah.
In quite low-cost productions, and obviously their production values weren't as high as we're used to seeing, but they were the best that were available at the time.
Absolutely.
So that would be interesting.
Very interesting. And, it's the big film studios and the big music labels that are against all this sharing of films and music on the internet. But I think if they embraced it, they'd probably find that there's a lot more audience for the independents out there than there are for the big names.
In recent times, this has started to be proven with publishing books, stories, people that sit down and dream up ideascapes, for want of a better description. And that largely has its roots in internet access to work, which is very interesting. Yeah. Having said that, you can buy the software we now know if you want to do a little bit of blogging on the side.
Yeah, or even a radio show. It's all possible now.
Podcasting.
Podcasting from the comfort of your own living room.
Inside your own packet of fresh garden peas.
Yes.
Oh no, that's not that sort of pod, is it? No. You've got a final bit for us?
I have indeed. There's a story here in the Daily Express that says tribute bands have never been so popular and are proving that sometimes you can beat the real thing. They've got a big story here about how tribute bands like the Counterfeit Stones are growing in popularity. And I've got to agree, I saw the Australian Pink Floyd a little while ago. And
that's what they work under, Australian Pink Floyd?
Yeah, that's their name. I've seen the real Pink Floyd, and I've seen Roger Waters and his band doing Pink Floyd numbers. And out of all of them, I think the best fun I had was probably with the Australian Pink Floyd.
Really?
Yeah, so if you can see it for a fraction of the cost in the comfort of your local pub, why not?
One of the bands that really impressed me was the Ill Eagles. Ill Eagles.
Very good.
Yeah, they were very good. And it just sort of shocks you. You think, oh, that's a great song. When did that come out? And you look it up, and it was 1973, 74, 75 or something. So we've sort of grown up with the Eagles playing. You don't realise when they started. It was absolutely ages ago. News that Fidel Castro has claimed that his country, Cuba, should see a future without me as he turns 80. It may seem 80 a lot to some people, but it's extraordinary to think that he's been in such a significant position for so many years. I suppose there'll come a time when people put his work and his ideas and his practices and inspiration under a spotlight. But it's quite an extraordinary story that people tell you that have been to Cuba, and they come out the other side and they say, and on Sundays they go to the park and have ice cream. Apparently they don't do it on Saturday, things like this. And they're very well developed in homeopathic medicine in Cuba, largely because they don't have access to conventional drugs, or have the access that one would expect just 90 miles away on the American mainland. So it's been a pleasure to work with you this morning, George. Thank you everyone who's called today, and hopefully a quick blimp through the papers has inspired you with a few thoughts. After the news, it's the Sports Breakfast, the Alan Brazil Sports Project, with Mike Parry and Graham Beecroft, and they'll be talking about what's the funniest line ever. I think the Milky Bar's on me. I think that sort of sums it up. Next week I might even tell you, should I have the opportunity, who made the invitation to me. This is talkSPORT.